Greetings and salutations, my good friends. This is, of course, yours truly, Sugi Shogun here, and today I'm going to be reviewing slightly older anime this time from the year 2014, and it's called World Trigger. And one of the main reasons doing this review right now is due to the fact that it's finally getting its second season on January 2021 after more than 4 years of waiting. And it's been a long of a wait for the people who are watching it when it was airing back in the day, especially since they know that the final episode kind of leaves on a massive cliffhanger, and it was not obviously the best ending that they could have done in case they already knew that they were not going to be continuing the series in a long time. And World Trigger is based on a manga of the same name that ran on the Weekly Shonen Jump from February 2013 till November 2018, and after that it was actually moved into the sister magazine known as Jump Square, which is aimed for more of an adult audience or a bit older audience than Weekly Shonen Jump, which to me is quite interesting given the fact that World Trigger is not exactly this most violent or super mature type of a series. It does have a high level of analytical stuff, which is probably the most complex element about it, but I wouldn't say that it's like definitely even the most bloodiest type of a show in the whole Weekly Shonen Jump magazine. But let's kind of start out by kind of laying out what the series is about and then kind of reviewing everything. So the premise takes place in Earth, in Japan, in a place called Mikado City, which is, by the way, a fictional place. And there are these strange creatures, which are called neighbors, which are these malicious beings who are kind of like impervious to traditional weaponry. That means guns, knives, and etc. And in response to the arrival of these aliens, so to speak, this organization was created called the Border Defense Agency, which basically combats these neighbors through these special weapons, which are called triggers. There's many types of triggers, and they will be explored very truthfully throughout the series, and it's kind of like, one of the main crux of how the combat system basically works in this series. And basically, these gates get opened into Mikado City, and then the neighbor agents are there to basically fight against them. There's this thing, research called Tryon, which is kind of like the life force of kind of like every single thing. And they use the Tryon to basically fuel up these triggers to technology. And this is basically used to destroy these neighbors. So in itself, it's not like this sort of a isekai or a parallel world in the sense that the people are unaware what's going on. They are well aware of the threat of these neighbors. I don't know why they still live in the actual place where the civilians are there when it's almost like daily basis when these invasions come in, which is kind of interesting to me. And the origin of the neighbors is they're coming from this grander universe, which is called the neighborhood, which is a system of it's like a galaxy which has multiple planets on it. So the world of World Trigger is kind of vast, and due to the fact that it's sci-fi is always fundamentally very easy to expand on, like how does it work and like how you can introduce new stuff. And that's kind of the beauty of sci-fi, that you can always create new stuff, and that's not something you always can do with a lot of fantasy shows or other things that are which more narrowed down. And basically, it follows this main character known as Mikumo, Osamu. And Osamu is a very different type of a main character. I will talk about him in a second. And he meets this new strange kid who comes from a portal basically called Kuga, and he is, or Yuuma, they kind of like change between the surnames, and the middle first names a lot in this series, kind of annoying. And basically, he is the second protagonist of the series, and then there's this Chica, which is this girl, kind of like the lolly factor here, sort of and she is kind of like third protagonist of sorts in the series. It's a very leveled out series, though, in the sense that a lot of the side characters get a lot of play in here and screen time. And even though these are the three main characters, there are other characters, such as Jin, who is very apparent on throughout the series and, shows up quite frequently, almost on every episode. And basically, there is now a knowledge that there's some humanoids also in these other, galaxies, basically, and they are kind of controlling the neighbors, and then they basically find out different ways to combat them. And that's kind of the main premise of the series. It's so kind of getting the review portion finally. So one of the things I have to call out immediately for the people watching this series is the fact that it's one of the weakest pilots that I've ever seen in anime. I did watch it back in 2014 when it came out. I was absolutely uninterested on it. It was not impressive. Animation, everything about it was very lackluster. I always give a shot to all Weekly Shonen Jump series, and they always have this eye for quality, and it turns out when you stick out with a lot of these Shonen Jump series, they actually show their appeal, and that's what I got with World Trigger. After you get into a couple of episodes in, the world gets more broadened up, you learn more about it and its secrets and everything like that, and it gets a bit more interesting after that, especially when the humanoid enemies come around. Then it becomes more of a political struggle and kind of a bit of a mind games. The author is really good at building these fights in the series. They're very analytical, strategy is very heavy there, and it's just really well done from that perspective. So there's that analytical side to it. Animation is done by Toei, which is not necessarily known for their high quality stuff, and that's probably one of the main downsides of this anime, I think, in the manga, sort of, that some of the designs are kind of bland and boring, and if there was another artist behind the series, if writer would stay the same and there was a different character illustrator, I think this would have been wildly more popular series altogether. And it also doesn't really help that the fact that there are a couple of characters that look extremely similar to each other, so distinguishing them from each other is problematic, and that's something you want to definitely avoid as a mangaka or as an anime runner, because you never want to do characters that look similar, because you don't want to get confused and that will hurt the plot. And as I said, there are these mysteries behind everything. Yuuma has its own reason why he has come into Earth, and he's searching for something. I will not go into detail what exactly his background story will be flushed out in the series, but necessarily all of these mystery elements were not necessarily portrayed on the best narrative way possible, that they could have been more mystery-like type of storytelling here, a music to fit into it, and more inner dialogue in their heads and stuff like that could have played a bit more benefit, playing the story and executing it in a bit different way that it was perhaps done in the manga, or the way at least it was executed in the anime. It wasn't the best way I would have basically done it. Also, I like about the series that the fact that the main character is not just some random dude who is, I'm gonna save everybody, and then he gets random power-ups. The Osamu is probably the weakest main character I ever known. He constantly loses. He's very weak. He's great at strategy, not the best though. I mean, it's probably one of the best in the series, but he's not ultimately the best strategist that we see. And he has a lot of flaws. Because he's so weak, and he has a lot of this sort of a retrospective analysis on his performance and on his failures. And just looking things from a retrospect. What did I do wrong? What did I do okay? And that's something I like about this series, is that the character is not expected to win a lot of the time. So when there's a battle or something, I don't know the outcome, because the show has consistently shown that the main character can lose. Even Kuga, who is a bit of an OP machine, he loses too. So there is definitely this sort of a kind of weird realism in this series, which is one of, I think, the strong appeals of this series, because I think most people are kind of tired of these protagonists, which are just steamrolling everybody through and beating everybody without no effort whatsoever. And there's like proper training arcs and everything, like it feels like they're trying out, and it's not like hitting 2 hours in the gym and suddenly are just randomly super powered up. And these things are one of the things that I think are one of the appealing aspects of World Triggered, which makes it really different from rest of the Shonen Jump series. Now, also when it comes to the world building, I think it's pretty good. In terms of like how buildings look and the world looks kind of boring. The Aftercraft, which is mentioned later on, kind of looks cool, but the animation and the graphical side of things have never been the most impressive part about World Trigger. As I said earlier, if that would have been different, I do like Yuma's design a lot. I think he's the best designed character in this, but a lot of the other characters look way too bland for me to be main characters or even major characters in this. And if they were drawn a bit differently and more uniquely, I think this would have had like a massive impact on the popularity of the series. And I do, yes, believe that it is an underrated series, but it has its flaws. One of the other flaws is the OST. Not really impressed by it. Toei has some of the very strongest OSTs. Dragon Ball used to have a lot of great tracks. Recently in Dragon Ball Super. One Piece has some very solid tracks. What else is by Toei? I'm not sure. It's Bleach. Also amazing soundtrack. World Trigger's soundtrack is lackluster. I think that also could have been a lot better. The openings and the endings are pretty meh. Not very distinguishable or memorable. It's just one of those things. I mean, it's not horrible, but, I always talk about that is always the aspect that you can improve on and make the show feel better than it actually is. Now, there's also a filler arc, which is roughly around 14 episodes, if I counted right. And I have to say, I was not initially, I kind of suspected this could be filler, but initially I thought this could be actually like a real part of the story. It kind of is executed in a wrong time of the arc, so to speak, especially because the whole arc ends up on the 73rd episode, and it's not a conclusion. And this invasion, basically starts, this new arc starts, this new war, and this show suddenly stops, and now after 4 years of waiting, we get back to resume that arc. So that's interesting, but the filler arc is actually not too bad. I mean, I don't like fillers. And maybe I'll do at some point this video, the best filler arcs in anime, but I don't really have any filler arc which I would speak positively. But when you compare to the quality of the series itself, it's actually quite up there in terms of actually a solid filler arc, which kind of contributes a bit to the story. And, I think it's not too bad. It's just a bit stretched out. If it was a filler arc that was maybe half as long as it was, it's kind of dragged out, to be honest. The rest of the anime I think, is goodly paced. It doesn't really have pacing issues. Maybe the start is kind of slow and not very interesting. And because pilots always should sell you on the anime. And when you watch live action shows, they usually do that job when you kind of have a very good idea what the series will be based on the pilot. But that's not really the case with anime. Claymore is a good example of a series that I was so close on dropping, but once I made it to the 8th episode, it became one of my favorite animes of all time. So sometimes the animes do take some time to actually get interesting and build the setup, because in this anime, as I keep talking about the neighbors, I don't think they are the most important or interesting aspect about the world. I think it's the humanoids. The humanoid enemies are outside in the other worlds, which kind of made it more interesting. Because anytime about monsters, whether it's in Attack on Titan or the Hollows in Bleach, these are not entities that really talk or have really lore around them. They just do kind of animalistic behavior, and they're just getting chopped off, basically, and that's it. But and as for a lasting, yes, the horrible timing of the ending episode, it's not the best conclusive ending for a series, but I'm lucky that there's finally continuation for it, so it's okay. Now, second season, I don't know how long it will be. I definitely will be watching it. This is not a super hard sci-fi series. It may feel like a bit of a sci-fi series. It has concepts of space, but it kind of falls more on the elements of cyberpunk more so, and a lot of the fights are kind of, because people are wielding swords and things like that, and there are some type of a fantasy-like elements to it, which make it feel like a bit different from your like a sci-fi show. It kind of like reminds me a bit of Hitman Reborn in that sense, that it's kind of like fantasy combining with some sci-fi elements. And that's pretty much my rundown of World Trigger. TLDR, it's an okay show, slightly underrated because it does get better, but it does have still those lacking departments, the OST, the animation, the character designs, all of those are really bland, and it doesn't really help that the second season studio is once again Toei, but it seems that the animation is slightly better. We don't know who's going to be the producer. Is that going to be TV Asahi like it was on the first season? But remains to be seen. However, World Trigger is definitely earning its credit and, you know, the popularity that the manga truly has in Japan. A lot of people don't just sit through enough to get like the actual appeal of the series. And I can understand why people drop it after 2 episodes, because it doesn't do the job on selling you the series. Now, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video, whenever it may be. I'll see you soon. Cheers. See you soon.